Hey, good morning. Scott Luton and Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's webinar. Greg, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, Scott. How are you doing?
Doing wonderful. We got a bunch of rain here in the Metro Atlanta area. The garden blooming, flowers, trying to grow our green beans. We had a bumper crop last year on that, so we're very welcoming of the rain. How about you?
Weather report is much better here, Scott. While incredibly steamy, yeah, it's pretty sunny outside. So I'll not pile on, but it's a pretty good day here, and of course, looking forward to our topic today. Right?
Home run topic. In
It
fact,
is.
the panel and the discussion is going to be almost as beautiful and maybe even a little bit hotter than the weather here in Metro Atlanta. So we're kicking off a little bit early. So we're going to give folks a chance to kind of come in, funnel into the webinar. We know all the competing priorities here as we get through. Can you believe it's already
Mostly lunch, getting their sandwiches made, I think, right?
right. I had my turkey sandwich earlier, but May 24th, hard to believe we're already here, 3/4 of the way through May. But today's webinar, since you broached the subject, Greg, today's webinar, we're going to be talking about the golden age of warehousing. In particular, we'll be talking about the 10 competencies of best-in-class warehouses. Greg, should be a great conversation, right?
Definitely will. First of all, kind of think table stakes, right? What you've got to have to just be in the game, all the way through how you can excel and differentiate yourself. I mean, if you think about, Scott, what is going on in the world today with e-commerce, I just call it commerce, but
Right. I was about to
we
say.
have to use the omni-channel or multi-channel term, I guess, whatever. But think about people now as people rush back to stores, right? But still buy a substantial amount online. The complexities that creates in both the way people shop and the way they get their goods fulfilled. And there's this great mystery behind the buy button. What goes on back there behind that buy button? So we're going to learn a little bit about that today.
We are. It's going to be an awesome and incredible and awesome conversation. And big thanks to all the folks that are funneling into the webinar session. Kiki, Amin, of course, big thanks to Amanda, Chantel, and Catherine behind the scenes, the production team helping to make it happen here today. Hey, Greg, before we get started, I want to offer up a few housekeeping notes.
Right.
We bring in our esteemed panel.
Kids.
Buckle up, stay in your seats, keep all your hands inside the vehicle, whatever.
That's
right. All attendees, folks, are going to be on mute as we're recording today's session. But with that said, we encourage you to ask questions, share your observations. In fact, we're going to have time for 1 or 2 questions at the end of the webinar here today. And with all of that, be sure to join in the conversation via the chat function on the Own24 platform. And I'm told if you can't find that, that's in the middle toolbar. Look for the little chat bubbles and you'll be able to join in there. And finally, Greg, if folks enjoy this webinar, we invite them to be sure to find and subscribe to Supply Chain Now wherever you get your podcasts. Greg.
Or YouTube.
That's right.
I love YouTube, man. Right? That's where I spend my spare time, looking at what's going on in various beaches, right?
And that
scammers. I love that.
You can find whatever you're looking for on YouTube, including Supply Chain Now. But hey, we have arrived at the point where we want to bring in our esteemed panel. Folks, buckle up. You're going to hear a lot and learn a lot from our 3 panelists here today. Yeah. I want to introduce them, and then we're going to swoosh them into the webinar here. Dorothy Sad, COO and CFO with Unique Vintage. Also, Bharat Chandu, Consulting Director at RSM, and Ron Riggin, Chief Technology Officer at ShipHawk. Hey, Dorothy, Bharat, Ron, how are we doing today?
Hey, Scott. Doing well.
Hey, Greg.
Great
how are you doing,
see everybody. Great to see everybody. So, before we get to the main topics of the day, the topics du jour, I want to get to know each of y'all a little bit better and give our audience really an opportunity. Greg and I and the whole team have enjoyed our pre-show conversations, and we want to share some of that with the folks that are tuned in here today. So I want to start with Dorothy. Dorothy, tell us a little about yourself.
Hey, Scott. So, I'm an ops and finance executive. I've been in the industry 30 years. I've primarily focused in fashion and outdoor. And one of my favorite things to do when I'm not working is to hike and bicycle in Santa Monica Mountains.
Wow, I love that. You beat me to the punch. I was going to mention
Yeah,
you
yeah,
live
yeah.
in that beautiful Los Angeles area, and you've already shared. And what I loved about Dorothy, as on one of our last calls, she tracks all of her hiking. And she loves the metrics, loves the data side.
KPI, Steve, KPI.
It's
Dorothy,
all about the metrics.
that's right. We love that, Dorothy. Well, Greg, that's just the first panelist. Where are we going from here?
Well, let's talk to Bharat. So, Bharat, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I think you and I may share a sport fanaticism that we can talk about a little bit too.
Sure. So yeah, I'm Bharat Chandu. I'm a consulting director in our NetSuite ERP practice at RSM. The past 12 years of my career has been implementing ERP systems for manufacturers, distributors, and retailers. As part of that, I also have a lot of experience integrating ERPs to various supply chain tools, whether it's demand planning solutions or warehouse management solutions, transportation management systems. And I think our common sports interest is golf. I play golf pretty regularly in my spare time, about 3 times a week. Try to get 2 nines in during the weekdays, and then one 18 on the weekends.
Man, yeah, you're my dream bromance. So since you get to play so much, I hope you get to play a lot of courses. I don't know if you take your sticks with you when you're traveling, but tell us, what's one of your favorite courses that you played?
So I recently played TPC Potomac, which is right here in Maryland. They just had the Wells Fargo Championship there, actually. It was a really, really tough course. Didn't shoot as well as I normally do, but it was a great experience.
Would you say you're a ringer for scrambles? Because we may have need for a third, Bharat.
Absolutely. Happy to jump on in whenever you need a fourth.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. Well, Ron, all right, let's don't leave you out, right? So tell us a little bit about yourself, and then, we'll talk about what it is you love to do as well.
All right, cool. Well, good morning, everybody. So the first 20 years of my career, like Dorothy, I've got a few more years than a lot of folks, but first 20 years of my career as co-founder and CTO of Mark Global, where we really focused on delivering solutions to tier 1 companies all over the world. So a lot of on the floor experience with putting in WMSs and building them and providing value for our customers. Last 10 years focused a little bit more on taking that best practice experience and applying it to building mid-market solutions. And so we've aligned with ERPs like NetSuite and Acumatica and whatnot. And that solution set is now part of ShipHawk, where I serve as their CTO, and very happy to be doing so.
Yeah, well, welcome aboard. I mean, we've been talking to the folks at ShipHawk for a while. Glad to get to know you. You and I very nearly crossed paths while at Mark Global.
Yep.
And I've spent a lot of time on kind of as a practitioner in kind of each of the areas that you guys have talked about. So, Ron, I know you're an outdoorsman, so and I hope I've introduced you to something valuable at Subpar Parks.
That's right.
Instagram in the pre-show. But tell us about some good reviews you can give of national parks.
Yeah, so my family has always enjoyed traveling national parks, and certainly, as we talked about earlier, Yosemite is at the top of my list. But even if there's state parks, we have a state park here out in Western Maryland, Deep Creek State Park, where I spend a ton of time hiking, biking, snowboarding, and the likes. So
wow,
love the outdoors, and out there when I can.
Literally getting your feet wet.
Yep.
Love that. Hey, well, really quick, got a lot of folks in the chat. I want to say hello to John, one of our favorites, Guy Corton. Great to see you, Guy. Adish. And Kiki says, really quick, Dorothy is a fellow Boilermaker. Dorothy, Purdue was part of your journey. Is that right?
That's right. I was an engineer with the best of them.
Really?
Well, during the pre-show, I would have pegged you as a margarita maker, but since
well, one of my favorite all-time NFL quarterbacks is Jim Everett, who played for the Rams and the Saints, and I think the Chargers. And of course,
I have a good story about Jim. We were computer programmers together.
No, really? All right, so we're gonna have to bring you back, Dorothy. We do a show that we're overdue for, supply chain nerds. talking about ourselves, talk sports.
Talking to
You know,
football players.
yes.
I'll see
So
if I can get Jim to join. I'm
let's
sure
do
he'll
that.
jump right to it.
All right. So, Dorothy, I'm going to circle back. I'm going to hold you to that. But lots of good stories there, it sounds. But regardless, welcome, Ron, Bharat, and Dorothy, and Greg. We got a great panel here today. And hey, we're a couple minutes ahead of schedule. That's a beautiful thing. So, with that said, I want to dive into our topic today. I'm going to give you all kind of a coming attractions of what we're going to be talking about. So, we're going to be discussing the 10 of the top competencies of best-in-class warehouses. We're going to be walking through 3 stages: basic warehouses, good warehouses, and then best-in-class warehouses. So this is going to be such a great benchmarking opportunities from 3 pros that certainly know. So we're going to start here with Ron first. And Ron, I'm going to pose this question to you as we flip to the next slide. Hey, what are the characteristics of a basic warehouse?
So it's interesting because in some respects, the concept of mobilization has been around for literally decades. The pioneers, my colleagues back in the 80s, lived on proprietary devices that literally displayed 40 characters by 4 lines of text. And while that seems limiting, it actually sort of defined the nature of the beast here, because it forced us to be very transactional. It forced us to take the steps that are required to accomplish a task and feed them to an operator point by point by point, much like your GPS in your car guides you from turn to turn to turn. And that model is still very relevant today, because we're using devices that are running on ubiquitous Wi-Fi. They're in your pockets. The only difference is that they're ruggedized, and they can offer a very immersive experience. But the WMS is not a social media app. It's not something that you want a warehouse operator in the middle of an aisle fumbling around using a touchscreen to point and click to things. You want them to use auto ID technology, scanners, RFID devices, whatever, to capture information, verify what they're doing, where they're going. So even though the technology has dramatically changed, the speeds and capacities have changed, if I'm operating on a small mobile device, the concept of being very transactional is still very important in your warehouse. So just keep that in mind as you're looking at different apps. Likewise, mechanization has been around for a while, forever, long before even wireless devices. You'll see it much more in the tier 1 space, but it is applicable in the mid-market as well for strategic placement. And what has changed, and you'll hear this theme with me a lot today, is that APIs have changed so dramatically that it's very easy to integrate these devices for inline scales, dimensioners, inline labelers, carton sortation systems. And I'm not talking about higher end automation, which I'll talk about later. I'm just talking about simple conveyance from one point to another. And there can be tremendous value gained by just implementing a couple of simple concepts like inline weighing to save a lot of labor and get value on that investment. The only point to be aware of there is that we've all moved to the cloud, or at least the best in class have moved to the cloud, and your conveyor systems and your PLCs are inside your firewall in your enterprise. So you have to be very clever in the techniques that are used to be able to communicate to those devices, which with today's processing speeds is certainly capable, but you need to be very clever to make sure that you're not violating any security through the firewall and things of that nature. So that's something else to be aware of. So mobilization, mechanization, very basic. Everyone should be able to do it, but there are still subtleties of how you should do it moving forward that will give you the greatest value and return on your investment.
Well said, Ron. And Greg, I'm circled. You can get your quick follow-up comment. Before I do, big thanks, big welcome to Walter, who's joining us in from San Diego, Michelle and Ryan, Sim, and by the way, Bharat, Guy is very jealous that you're getting those 3 opportunities a week getting out into on the golf course. Okay, so starting with what Ron just shared there, Greg, your commentary kind of on the basics, right? Mobilization and mechanization.
Yeah, well, we talked about table stakes right at the beginning, right? I mean, there are certain things you ought to be able to do. I mean, of course, if you're starting in your garage, you don't have some of these things, right? And because you don't have the scale maybe of SKUs or items, you don't have the scale of size that a full-size warehouse has. But once you get into a warehouse of any size, these are the things that make it efficient and effective for you to go and pluck your products. I know it's technically called picking, Ron. I just like pluck. Go and get your products and be ready to fulfill your customer's demand. But as Ron said, these things have been around since we were kids. All of us here, Bharat may not have been born yet, but all the rest of us were kids. So if you're looking to get to that next stage, this basic layout, this basic kind of level of technology or process is where you need to go first. I think that's really valuable because there are a lot of companies growing from, in some cases, fulfilling from their basement, bedroom, or garage to needing a facility of greater size, and they probably just don't even know what they need yet.
Excellent point. Excellent point. And you mentioned Bharat. We're going to head to Bharat next as we get into the characteristics of a good warehouse, right? We're starting with the basic warehouse as we cover these 10 competencies of the best-in-class warehouse. Cover the basic, and now we're moving into the good warehouse. So, Bharat, I think we're going to start with channelization before we move to Dorothy next. So tell us about channelization.
Sure. So channelization is really referring to two things from a warehouse perspective. How the orders are coming in to the warehouse, right? Which could be, in today's world, direct-to-consumer sites, B2B portals, Amazon, iPhone, Android apps. Customer service people might still be taking orders over the phone. And the warehouse has to be flexible enough to ingest those different orders and have different workflows and pick strategies and whatever to accommodate those orders coming in. Also, the orders coming out must be flexible in the warehouse depending on the channel. So you may have your own warehouse today, but you may decide that you want to have 3PLs in order to expand nationally or globally. They may or may not be able to run on your warehouse management system. You may have to integrate to their warehouse management system. You might choose to start drop shipping from your vendor. You may be selling through Amazon Fulfillment Center, shipping through 3PLs. All this sort of stuff are various channels of how orders can kind of come in and how they go out. And you really need a warehouse environment that is flexible enough to accommodate both types of channel scenarios.
Well said, Bharat. I appreciate that. Dorothy, we're about to head to you in just a second. I want to give a shout out to Kevin Ramneek and Tyler are all with us in the chat. Appreciate that. Y'all let us know what your thoughts are as we cover this top 10 list. And good to see you, OTD. Okay, so Dorothy, we want to move into customization. That's part of the golden era we're in. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, so you can define customization so many different ways, but I'm going to just name a few here, right? So first of all, customers are used to getting what they want when they want it, right? So if they order a dress and a pair of shoes, they get a dress and a pair of shoes. We may have them in two different warehouses. So we may customize, we may ship what we need to ship, but they want things to come as they get them from the multi-billion-dollar companies, even if we're tiny. And then there's a huge amount of variability and customization and things like Bharat mentioned in drop shipping and or all these different freight configurations for express shipping, gift wrapping, you name it. Customers king. So there's a lot of work we need to do in our DC network to make sure whatever we're doing and what we need is transparent to them.
Well said, Dorothy. All right, so really quick, before we head back to Ron for specialization, Greg, customizations everywhere, regardless of your business size, and you better meet those demands, right?
Well, we were talking about pet peeves yesterday on the Buzz, weren't we? And what is our pet peeve? Mispicks, right? So, and arguably, if you order a dress and a shoe and shoes, which I have not personally done, but I'm not against it. If you're ordering something that comes as an outfit, then you want it to come as close together as possible. I was actually thinking back, Dorothy, as you were saying this, to when my father used e-commerce in the early days. He ordered from a company that I think no longer exists called Sears, who used to be the kings of mail order. But in the e-commerce days, he ordered us this vast holiday China set. And it literally came in 11 different shipments, right? 3 of which were completely shattered. All of those things are things you have to think about as well. The customer expectation, right? Customization of packaging and, timing in terms of days. And all this really ties together because the channel through which you can get it also helps define the customization of particularly consumer fulfillment, right? So, I was thinking, and this is both customization and channelization, I think I don't know if people realize, Bharat, that people, when they get a personalized note from somebody, that may not be written by their actual Etsy or whatever vendor. That might be written by the 3PL, and that's the kind of services that companies can get. And so because of all of those dynamics, you have to have a solution that is really, really flexible and can accommodate not only your business, but probably multiple businesses, especially if you're using 3PLs to fulfill.
Well said. Well said. And I'm coming to Ron as we round out here in just a second. But hey, Elise is tuned in from beautiful Hawaii. Man, that paints a picture. Isi, perhaps, is with us. Let's see here. Tom Valentine, old TV, has joined in, and Jenny Patzloff. Great to see you, Jenny. Okay, so Ron, we've talked about channelization with Bharat. We've talked about customization with Dorothy and Greg. And now let's talk about specialization. So tell us more.
So yeah, you've all been stealing a little bit of my thunder, but I'll fail on a couple of things. But just to highlight, from a channelization standpoint, not only do we have to get these orders from these channels, but we have to make these orders look like they came from those channels. So we're seeing more and more branding and white labeling of having to make that order look like the original source of that drop ship, which again drives packing, and it has to be effortless. We can't rely on a text message to tell the packer, make sure you include this pack list. It has to come out automatically and effortlessly to be efficient in the operation. Dorothy mentioned, unique packaging experiences. You may have influencers in today's e-commerce world, and they may have to get a very special type of corrugate or packaging that makes them feel special, because every consumer needs to feel special now. And some of the comments about your 11-box shipment, customers are way more aware nowadays of the way in which things are packaged and how efficient they are and how friendly they are to the environment. So making sure you got the right sized package for your orders for the consumer, that you're using green products for your consumer, that you're adapting to the branding and the outside of the package for your consumer is all very important. But in the specialization compliance area, it's not just about keeping the consumer happy, it's about keeping your major retailer happy as well. Because now, if you screw up for a consumer, you're going to lose business in the future. If you screw up for a major retailer, you're going to get a bill and a chargeback.
For sure.
The requirements for UCC labeling and EDI compliance are just exponentially growing lately, where every retailer feels they're special. They need special labels, they need special EDI formats, special segments, special content. And if you're not compliant and capable of supporting those needs, you will be paying them more money to receive your goods than you're getting in your invoices. And certainly the industry has evolved dramatically over the last decade, where there are service-oriented architecture solutions where you can simply say, hey, I'm delivering to customer XYZ, give me a UCC label, and the label appears, so that we don't have to have a library of 250 different retail labels. So that has definitely enabled this industry and this business, and something you should be looking for with your vendors. Are they building a custom label every time you need a new retailer SSCC label, or are they just leveraging services that are out there that can be harnessed and utilized in the solutions? I think that's a very important competency in today's marketplace.
Completely agree. Excellent points there all the way around. Bharat, Dorothy, Ron, and Greg. And really quick, Elena is with us here today. And I think I said that right. It could be Alana. I get that wrong. It's one of the tricky names. But she is a Boilermaker as well. And she says, boiler up. I guess that's a thing, Dorothy. So Purdue is well represented here today at Supply Chain Now.
Where's all the Maryland Terps?
Ron, seriously, where's the Terps? Where's the Nationals fans?
Yeah.
Where's our fellow Atlantans? And Guy, you've got a great question. We'll try to carve out some time in the end to pose that to Bharat. But let's keep driving. We're getting into really the 5 key dynamics, the key themes that really cause the cream to rise to the top, right? That creates that best-in-class warehouse. So let's share that visual really quick. And I think we're going to start with Bharat first and then Dorothy as we talk about globalization. So Bharat, tell us more.
Sure. So today's supply chain is obviously becoming increasingly more and more global. Worldwide current events can have immediate impacts on supply chain costs for everybody. We're seeing that right now with Ukraine, for example. As consumers, we see increasing gas costs. But for businesses, this is having huge impacts on freight, especially ocean freight worldwide. And as freight keeps kind of rising and getting more costly, companies need to understand what is that doing to their landed inventory costs. And they need to make sure that they're adjusting pricing accordingly to make sure that their margins are not taking a huge hit. If you're in an outdated WMS or ERP system, you may not be really able to capture those costs and include them, run the proper reports, work with your pricing team, and figure out what are the adjustments you need to make to adapt to this. And just aside from that, just being able to manage foreign currency risk that you might have with fluctuating exchange rate costs. And in today's day and world, it's very, very important that you have real-time, accurate inventory insight for making business decisions. And if you're working with outdated systems, you're just not going to get that. And that problem's only going to get worse and worse as you expand globally.
Excellent points there, Bharat. It's not getting any easier if you're driving around in a Model T, right? Dorothy, what would you add to that globalization?
I would add sort of the angle of the world is a lot smaller. Anyone, anywhere can find you, and you can find them, right? And then we go back to our WMS and our shipments, right? So somebody in Angola might want to dress in a pair of shoes, Greg. And
Right.
we're going to box it up and we're going to get it to Angola because
Somehow.
maybe they have a vintage flapper party and they found our product online, and we got a great international veneer so you can check out in your local currency. But I think that's a micro view. The macro view is larger global brands have a many-to-many situation, right? So they've got vendors all over the world. They've got inventories all over the world. And they need to be very nimble in terms of the way those are moving. There's a lot of drop shipping that's happening from Asia to other parts of the world. Depending on what product category you're in, you might be shipping from Europe to Asia. You might be shipping from Asia to the US. So there's a whole layer of complexity for globalization. And I think the best in class companies are tackling it regardless of their size. And as Ron mentioned earlier, the price of admission has gone down so dramatically in technology that it's enabled us to reach every corner of the globe. So you got to be ready.
Well, so much to dive into when it comes to globalization. And Greg, I'm going to get you to weigh in just a second. But hey, we got a couple comments. So Robin says Atlanta/Marietta is represented. So Robin, thank you for that. She also asked about sharing the slides afterwards. We're going to do you one better. We've got an ebook resource that you can actually download within the platform now, which is a very complimentary piece to the top 10 competencies of best-in-class warehouses. So download that, and that'll have these topics and a lot more, Robin. So thanks for joining us. Kevin says, go Yellow Jackets. So clearly he has got some roots here in the Atlanta area with Georgia Tech, and lots of good conversations going on in the chat. Okay, so Greg, before we move to Ron and optimization, I want to get you to weigh in really quick on globalization, some of the things that Bharat and Dorothy both mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, you have to acknowledge that companies can literally do business anywhere at about any time, and there are lots of ways to do it, right? I mean, we know of companies that enable you to participate on virtually every marketplace out there, right? Whether it's Mercado Libre or AliExpress or whatever it is, JD.com even, and all the ones across Europe and the US as well, which we all know of. So you have to be able to participate in this global world, but again, you have to Dorothy, to your point, you have to make it look local. I think about the days, to Ron, your point, the days when eBay and Amazon were coming up, and all of what they did had to be done internally. The handwritten notes, the fulfillment, all of that. They had to build the systems to do that, which cost literally billions of dollars. And this is the great democratization of technology, is that now that companies like ShipHawk and others have built technology, it's accessible to every person, right? To every company out there. And I think that's the beautiful thing. And in a lot of cases, it's easier to implement. It's easier to utilize, and it's more modern than some of the technologies that even the biggest companies are out there. So not only is it leveling the playing field, in some cases, it's actually giving you a very real competitive advantage.
Well said. And I'm going to move to Ron next. Hey, Ron, I'm glad I studied conjugation in English class because we're using a lot of TIONs throughout these 10 sessions, 6-syllable words. But let's talk about optimization, Ron. Tell us more.
All right. Well, anyone who knows me know I'm pretty opinionated on this topic because I think it's very critical to any warehouse operation. We talked about mobilization, and if all you're going to do is take a transaction and put it on a mobile device, there's some benefit to that, but that's not really getting you where you want to be. The vast majority of productivity in a warehouse is driven by inventory placement and traveling. And if you can simply do two things in the travel time that you do one, you've doubled your productivity. Mm-hmm. And so we have constantly focused on how do we combine tasks together to accomplish at the same time to drive our productivity and our throughput through all aspects of the operation. And of course, it's delivered in a very simplistic way on a handheld device, but that sophistication and optimization is behind the scenes. And the world has become more complex. And with these customization and channelization options, we no longer are getting 500 identical orders, we're getting 500 almost identical orders. And how you combine those orders in various picking strategies of knowing, oh, these are the identical ones, we can do a simple batch pick. These are the almost identical ones, or having small batches of 3 or 4 orders instead of 40 orders, and how you do that in the context of other small batches in 3 or 4 orders has become very, very important. And WMSs need to be able to pre-plan this and do it, because the warehouses are doing it today. They're just doing it with stacks of paper and labor, and they're using tribal knowledge to look at orders and say, oh, these two go together and these two go together. But now we have a fantastic cloud-based solution that can automate that for us. So whether it's combining tasks, directing tasks, prioritizing the work, directing the value-added services to the user, it's transparent, it's easy, it's natural. To the behind the scenes, it's very sophisticated and optimized, providing the kind of value that people are looking for when they invest in these solutions.
Love that. And by the way, clearly Ron is passionate about optimization. He also has a voice for Hollywood. He had to turn his phone off during today's session. Barat's getting calls from the PGA, and clearly Dorothy's getting calls from Purdue to serve as an ambassador for the Boilermakers. I love that. All right, and really quick, John Perry, Greg, our dear friend John Perry from Maine is with us here today. John Kennedy also is with us, and John says, hey, how about them national champion Georgia Bulldogs? So, John, congrats and welcome here today. All right, so Dorothy, let's move into visualization. So tell us more there.
All right, well, you heard me talk about KPIs earlier tied to hiking, but I'm with Ron. I love KPIs. I love dashboards. And the beauty of actually making the dashboard work is having visualizations of your performance, right? And agreement on what your metrics really are and should be. So I've got a couple of
you got some visual guides, visual aids.
But there are a lot of BI tools out there, and we'll talk about investment a little bit later. But understanding visually how you're performing in every area of the DC and in every area of your supply chain, frankly, because I never like to talk about a DC as to, 4 walls anymore, because it's really what's coming in and what's going out, right? It's really critical. And data is cheap. Takes a little bit of time to build a dashboard, but it's a game changer.
I love that. Okay, Greg, I can get you weigh in on that. Data is cheap. It takes a little time to build a dashboard and a game changer. Weigh in on visualization really quick, Greg.
Yeah, well, there's a couple things to acknowledge. One, we've talked about kind of the, I don't want to say archaic or ancient, but let's say legacy solutions for fulfillment and warehouse management. And you've got to think about that when those were built, there was a dearth of data. Right? Not nearly the robustness of data that we have today. And they were built to accommodate smaller bits of data or lesser definition in the data. And now we've got this incredible wealth of data, and we've got a ton of solutions out there that can both capitalize on it, as Ron said, behind the scenes with the optimization, which is absolutely critical because, Ron, you and I, we're both optimization lovers. Nobody gives a damn how optimization works. They just care that it does, right? And ultimately, what we're trying to do with all of that optimization behind the scenes is create a better path through the warehouse or whatever you're looking for, and also to capture and in some cases create the data that allows you to understand how you're doing each day, right? I remember the old supply chain reports, which were, how did you hurt the company yesterday, right? And now what we're trying to do is, Dorothy, to your point around visualization, is don't tell me, show me. And people are so visual these days. We're kind of appifying the incredible optimizations that go on behind the scenes and presenting them in a way that people now and in the future, more and more so, will love to utilize all of that data and analyze all of that data and understand it and turn it into meaningful action. So I think those underpinnings of this robustness and incredible availability of data are critical both to optimization. I know optimization ain't what it used to be, Ron, in the days when you and I started doing it, right? Optimization always had that sort of all of the things being equal sort of disclaimer to it, right? Now we know that all other things are not equal due to all the things that we've talked about here today, customizations and specializations, and all of those things that make the world that much more complex, but are also captured and now usable to allow us to be much, much more precise in how we understand and present how things are going in a fulfillment or warehouse management environment.
Well,
So
let's be
go
honest.
ahead, Ron.
Yeah, that computers are our friend, right? They've gotten a whole lot faster in the recent decade to where we can do crazy things in milliseconds that we couldn't have done 10 years ago. So why not take advantage of that?
Yeah,
So,
I mean, the cloud is effectively unlimited power for processing, and I think that's what has broken companies like ShipHawk away from the old guard who had an AS400 or whatever, some sort of hardware device in the warehouse,
Green screen.
Yeah.
literally on green screen, literally collecting dust, and creating a lot of dust. But
So power
yes,
to the
is.
people.
The power of technology has enabled us to both capture and utilize all this data.
So I want, for the sake of time, I want to get into automation, right? That certainly is far above on that top 10 list we're talking about here. Ron, talk to us about the rise of automation.
Yeah. So I keep referring to my past, but the past somewhat defines how we've evolved into the future. But I and my team have deployed countless, multi-100,000 square foot ASRS lights out warehouses where you bring pallets in, bring pallets out, or cartons in and cartons out. And they cost millions and millions of dollars that the tier ones use and get value out of, but have never been at a price point where a mid-market can take advantage of it. But technology has evolved so rapidly. And in fact, about 10 years ago, a major e-commerce retailer bought a relatively up and coming robotics company, and everyone scratched their head as to why they spent $795 million on a little iRobot vacuum that moved inventory around. And the reality is that changed everything, because now instead of having goods fixed and a person standing, I can bring the goods to the person, and I don't have to worry about the replenishment of that process because the goods are stored where they belong and where they're being put away to. So vehicle autonomy has dramatically changed the options for both tier one and mid-market. The goods to person model is very viable in certain circumstances. It's very dynamic. It's not a static resource that can't change over time as your workflows change. So whether you're bringing the inventory to the person or you're bringing pick carts to people who happen to be in the aisles in that person, those, again, they fall into the automation category, or I'm sorry, the optimization category. But we're basically pairing automation with the human, which I think is a very, very valuable combination. We not only have carts that can have larger displays, more visual displays that make it more understandable. We can use lights, we can use voice, and really drive that productivity factor for workflows that it makes sense for. And it's very accessible in the mid-market. Again, predominant contributor to that are APIs. The ability to integrate a WMS to these more advanced automation devices is really critical. We're not creating fixed files and putting them on FTP servers anymore. We have real-time communications using various, modern age protocols that are trivial to implement, and that's what's very important. So the key to today's automation space is that it is not static, is that the tools, the devices out there can be used and reused in different workflows as your business changes. And I think that's what held people back from automation in the past, because once you put it in, that was the only workflow it would support. And if your business changed, it became a dinosaur. So definitely seek out opportunities, and they are out there for the taking, and getting the return you're looking for.
Agreed. And that is some serious good news. We're going to round out the top 10 list here with Bharat and Dorothy talking retention. But really quick, Gilbert is tuned in from Chicago O'Hare. Gilbert, great to see you. Welcome, Jose. And David, you asked a question about
Good
you
question.
can drown in data. We'll try to circle back on that here towards the second half. Bharat, let's talk about retention, right? Tell us about talent retention.
Sure. So supply chain specialists like planners, buyers, warehouse associates, inventory managers, they all like working with easy-to-use systems, and they hate doing mundane data entry, especially in older legacy systems that are going off the market. In today's world, everyone wants to learn and use state-of-the-art technology. It's a resume builder. It opens up career opportunities. It makes people's jobs easier. Therefore, the more you can automate systematic tasks and focus employees to deal with problems and challenges that require human and critical thinking, the happier workforce you will have, the lower turnover will be, and the more specialized your workforce will be. And it's not just limited to the people in the warehouse too. It's important for executives as well, right? They need to have good systems that give them good KPIs and dashboards, like Dorothy was alluding to, in order to make good decisions. Executives don't want to be at a place where they have old systems that tell them meaningless information besides what went wrong yesterday, right? They want to act on this. They want to improve the business, improve margin, and you've got to have good technology to do that.
Excellent. Bharat. Dorothy, what else would you add to the conversation focused on retention?
Well, it's quite a topic for 2022. We've been battered and bruised, right? Through all of COVID. I would say a couple things. One is we realized with COVID that we're nothing without our warehouse workers. If they've all got COVID, there's nobody to pick, pack, and ship. Number two, there's some real basics around teamwork and, sort of encouraging, creating an employee environment that's attractive. I could talk about that for hours. But the third thing I just want to mention, over the years, I've really found that in the hourly employee minimum wage world, there are stars every day. And when you're a really good manager in a DC, you find them and you promote them quickly, right? And you engage them, as Bharat said, with new technology, because there are a lot of young people out there that want to hustle, and it's a great opportunity. And I've found over the years, if I find them quickly, they rise up the ranks and they become my best inventory manager. People love to see smart workers, male or female, rise up through the ranks quickly because they realize there's a chance for everybody.
That is there's so many t-shirt isms in what you just shared there, Dorothy. You're gonna have to shout that from the mountaintop of your next height, because there's so many business leaders that need to hear all of what you just shared. Really, all of y'all throughout this hour. By the way, Kristen Bevins, hello to you. You're in the comments, my dear friend Kristen. She asked a great question, and I'd love for the folks in the comments to address that. We'll try to touch on that towards in Q&A. But Kristen's talking about how can logistics facilities attract the new workforce and better compete in the new labor market. So, folks, I'd love to hear your ideas there. Okay, for the sake of time, though, with this esteemed panel, Ron, Bharat, and Dorothy, and of course my co-host Greg, let's move into our final thoughts. And Dorothy, we're going to stay with you here. If you had to kind of challenge our listeners, our audience with, hey, one thing they take away from today's conversation, one thing they've got to do, what would that be from your perspective?
You've got to keep investing. You got to stay ahead of the curve, right? And that doesn't mean just invest in software, doesn't mean just invest in your team, but you've got to look at the supply chain as something to invest in to win. And I think that it's very easy to spend all your money on sales and marketing, branding, because you're nothing without a brand, right? But you've got to invest to stay ahead, or you'll fall behind because consumers have extraordinarily high expectations today.
Well said, Dorothy. Spend the time, write the check. So make that happen. Dorothy, well said. Bharat, let's move to you as you think about your final thought here for our listeners.
Yeah, it kind of piggybacks off what Dorothy just said, but you have to evaluate the return on investment that you're getting on supply chain technology. Real-time accurate inventory is an absolute must in today's business, and you have to have the technology that'll give you that. And a lot of these tools can look pretty expensive, but the mistake people tend to make is they focus too much on the immediate price that they're seeing in front of them instead of trying to think, well, what is the return on the investment could be? Can this reduce headcount in departments of the organization that experience high turnover? Could I scale and do and become more efficient doing larger volumes of business with my customers? Will this help me expand regionally or globally? Which may not just mean more business from customers in new markets, but the opportunity to work with lower cost suppliers without sacrificing quality. So it's important to kind of consider all these things when deciding to invest in technology. You've got to look at the ROI. You cannot just see a 6-figure price tag and think, nope, not for me.
Well said. It's not just about what it costs, but what I'm hearing you say, Bharat, is what can it create, and of course that return on investment payback period. Okay, Ron, I'm gonna get Ron, and then of course Greg, I'm gonna get your final thought too. But Ron, man, so much here. I knew we had a Hall of Fame panel, but we need can we all bolt on a couple extra hours? Is that good? Ron, what are your final thoughts here?
So as you're looking out there in the WMS space, while there's been some consolidation in the industry of vendors and a couple of big players have emerged in the tier one, it's still a very decentralized, fragmented market. And there are still a million WMS solutions out there. And I always say to our prospects, look beyond the main menu, because nowadays with technology, every WMS out there, if they're anybody, can do receiving, put away, pick, pack, ship. You're going to check all the boxes. You need to get below that, understand your workflows, understand what can be done to optimize and gain value in your organization, and how can the solution support that. So my message is look beyond the main menu. Don't just have a checklist of 20 items, because everyone's going to say yes. And it's the subtleties of how do you interact with this application? Is it truly easy to use? Does it truly combine tasks in an efficient manner? And that's where you're going to get your value, not in those main menu items.
Well said, Ron. Hey, no pencil whipping. You got to dive deep. You got to lean in. You got to really know what we're talking about here. And what I'm hearing there as well, Greg, is that selection process and how leaders lead that process is so critical, especially given all the options out there. But Greg, your Reader's Digest final key takeaway here before we move into Q&A.
Yeah, don't focus on the how, focus on the why. Focus on what you're trying to accomplish. I mean, this probably will answer in a roundabout way some of the questions that we've received. If you focus on what outcome you want and then build back into the selection criteria that Ron talked about, the investment that you'll make that Dorothy talked about, and of course, all of the other aspects of design and process and people that Bharat talked about, and drive towards the goal, or back from the goal into the how, not start with the how. So many companies start with, well, this is how we do things, right? And let's configure your really advanced technology to do exactly what we do manually and things like that. Begin with the end in mind and work back to how you get things done. That's critical if you want to be one of the top best-in-class warehouses.
Well said, Greg. Well said. Okay. Hey, folks, we're going to move into Q&A here in just a second. But first, be sure to check out the ebook resource that the ShipHawk team has offered up. I think we've had over 100 folks already download that just in the last hour or so. Like the webinar, it's entitled The 10 Competencies of Best-in-Class Warehouses. So check that out. Also, we're not going to be able to get to everybody's questions, but the good news is we're going to be passing along the questions and where they came from to the ShipHawk team, so y'all can always compare notes over a cup of coffee or maybe a margarita after today's webinar. Dorothy, just for you, or a Boilermaker. That's right. So before we do that, and again, you can find the button to download that ebook right there on the platform. I want to make sure folks know how to connect with our panel before the Q&A. Ron, how can folks connect with you and ShipHawk?
Certainly through the LinkedIn connection, absolutely, or email. And those in my past, you still have my cell phone, and it's still the number. You can reach out anytime, as you know. So.
Wonderful. And folks, we're gonna make it even easier. You can see their speaker bios there, also in the On24 portal. Dorothy, how about you? How can folks connect with you?
Definitely LinkedIn. That's my preferred mode. Hit
Wonderful.
me up on LinkedIn.
We'll do that. And hey, we're going to make that that sports live stream happen. I can't wait to hear your stories there, Dorothy. And Bharat, how can folks connect with you?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is good. Encourage people to connect with me and message me there. Would be a nice change of pace from all the recruiters to get types of messages. So.
Hey, we love you recruiters. That's right. We love you recruiters, but hey, we've all experienced that for sure. Bharat. Okay. So we got a couple questions. Again, we're not going to be able to get everybody's questions. Guy, Tom, David, Jose, Kristen, all got some great questions there. I want to start though with this question from Catherine, and Ryan, will start with you. How has technology changed to facilitate all 10 of these competencies that we touched on here today?
Well, I've alluded to that in almost every theme I've promoted today, which is APIs, application programming interfaces. Being able to go to a vendor, go to a website, looking at how do I communicate with this solution? What are the endpoints? What's the content that I share? What's the content that I get back? And using technologies that are just effortless to implement allows a company to as Greg said earlier, recently I had a customer who on one weekend decided they wanted to deploy a 3PL in Mexico. And within a couple of weeks, we had the APIs up and running to communicate content back, to that 3PL using their API. And that's just so critical to be open, to be public, to be aware of the workflows, and allow external systems to use your services on demand with authority, of course, and security. But again, no longer shuffling files back and forth anymore.
Yes, that is a great thing. The shuffling of piles. Man, Muda is what comes to my mind. But Greg, I'll give you a chance to respond to that really quick before I got a question here from Clay for Bharat. Greg?
Yeah, well, I think that we can actually utilize all this vast wealth of data like we talked about earlier. That has to be one of the most important things because of the processing power of the cloud. And understand that no on-premise system will ever be able to process the depth or breadth of data that a cloud solution will be able to because of the virtually unlimited processing power in the cloud. So I think those couple things are the big things that stand out in my mind. They are the pillars on which a lot of technology is built today.
Well said, Greg. Power fueled by the cloud. Power to the people. Hey, John's asking about, has this been recorded? Yes, and it will be made available to all the registrants. And more to come on that from our team here at Supply Chain Now. Bharat, you're not getting out of the Q&A. We got a great question here from Clay, not how to make those tricky 7-footers, but it's about our ERPs becoming more closely aligned with WMSs. That's a great question. Your take, Bharat.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned before, it's very important in today's world to have real-time visibility into inventory levels, whether it's for planning purposes, for customer service purposes, publishing data on your e-com site, financial reporting. You have to have those inventory levels real-time available. And the way to do that is to integrate your ERP with the WMS. The days of manually exporting orders from your ERP, plugging them into your WMS, and then taking the fulfillments back and throwing it into your ERP. It's not scalable. It's not scalable. Nobody wants to do it. It's not a great long-term solution. You have to integrate with your ERP And a lot of ERP systems are starting to actually come out with their WMS systems in order to tackle the challenge that people don't want to invest in integrating with between their WMS and ERP. But it's an absolute must in today's world.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Hey, if something's not scalable, you got to be really looking yourself in the mirror and, hey, what should we be doing instead? Dorothy, I want to, as we start to wrap Q&A here, I want to ask you about a big theme that we've seen throughout the pandemic. That is SKU proliferation. I had to practice that second word about 17 times for the webinar today. How has that action, SKU proliferation in the fashion industry affected your business?
So first thing I want to say is everyone knows fast fashion, right? It's all about SKU counts. So when you've got 30,000 SKUs and 20,000 square feet, how do you make it work, right? We'd need a couple football fields to have, one SKU per location, right? Or a group of SKUs. So we use something called chaotic inventory management, which Ron loves. And it's very challenging, but the goal is to actually maximize the productivity of the space, right? And we get thousands of SKUs every month, and we've got to move through it. So I would say we're not alone. That's fashion. Consumers want fashion. They want newness. It's a huge challenge, and I think it is a huge part of our ROI on being an owner-operated DC rather than a 3PL, because our systems are configured to allow it, and it would be a lot tougher to outsource that.
Well said.
A lot to unpack there.
Yes, a lot. It really is, and it's tough to do it justice in a 1 minute or even a 10-minute Q&A session. So I appreciate you offering some initial thoughts. And while we're offering up our gratitude, by the way, I love what Jenny had mentioned some of your earlier thoughts that appreciation is key to retention. And Jenny says, as you said, thank yous are free. That is that's a big part of the good news here today. But hey, big thanks to Ron and the ShipHawk team for helping to facilitate this panel. Ron and Bharat and Dorothy had a blast. Ron, I'm going to give you the last word, because if folks want to get started, reach out and get to work, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just that easy.
Yeah. Look forward to working with each and every one of you in the months and years to come, I hope.
Wonderful. Well, officially, big thanks to our panel here, Dorothy Sad, COO and CFO with Unique Vintage, Bharat Chandu, Consulting Director at RSM, and, of course, Ron Riggin, Chief Technology Officer at ShipHawk. Thank you all, and we look forward to reconnecting with you soon.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, Greg, as you know, the swoosh waits for no one, not us,
Not even me.
anyone else. But man,
Please roll me.
I knew we had an outstanding panel that really tackled the questions and these dynamics from different angles.
Yep.
And it really, that's exactly what I heard over the last hour. What are some things you heard?
Yeah, I think I'm glad we didn't brush over it, but we didn't spend too much time in the basics. But I think that it's good that those 10 competencies were broken into 3 tiers, right? Is depending on where you are, this is the next stage for you. If you're a beginner, go basic. If you're at a basic stage, you can go good, and of course, good to great. A lot of those techniques are really, really important. I think it's important also to enunciate one thing very clearly, and that is the reason that solutions like ShipHawk and exist for TMS and WMS and other fulfillment tasks is because ERPs are typically very broad. Let me get my hands here. Very broad, but very shallow, right? Let's face the fact that ERPs started out as finance systems, and they've added on various supply chain capabilities because of demand by their customers, but they are typically very shallow in these things. And areas like TMS, WMS, demand planning, forecasting, all of those things deserve great miles of depth, not an inch of depth. So that's why we see so much of this technology proliferating, and why, and because there are also, as Ron talked about, a lot of levels of specialization. But now with the power that technology has, again, vis-a-vis the cloud, these companies don't have to decide we're only for this industry or we're only for this tier of the supply chain. They can build, like Ron has into his technology. They can build for the technologies or the companies that they're going after, or even technologies that they're opportunistically working with. So you see a lot of advancement in these technologies because of the way technology is built today. And again, because of the robustness and the wealth of data that is out there.
Well said. And all three of them had plenty of T-shirt isms, but I really liked and can appreciate Bharat's comment about, if you're using antiquated technology and you think life is tough now, just wait. Just wait.
We've been saying that feels like for 2 years, right? I mean,
Right.
if you built your house on sand, right, expect it to fall into the ocean.
That's right. And the accompanying hymn that we can never think of that comes with that. But regardless, hey, folks, hopefully you enjoyed this conversation as much as we have. As the folks in the comments, big thanks to Amanda, Chantel, and Catherine have stated and shared. You've got the ebook resource, so download that. And then the recording will be also made available. We'd invite you to connect with our speakers, Ron, Bharat, and Dorothy. Home run speakers. I'm looking forward to some Jim Everett stories. And again, if y'all enjoy this conversation, be sure, maybe in person, who knows? She talked about those football yards. All I can think about is Jim Everett to Flipper Anderson for the win against the Giants and I think the 89 playoffs. But hey, I'll save that for a later time.
Good.
Whatever you do, though, folks, hey, take action. Change the status quo, right? The environment's only going to get more and more challenging. I hope y'all can draw some inspiration from this panel here. And, of course, on behalf of our entire team here at Supply Chain Now, Scott Luton signing off, along with Greg White, challenging you to do good, to give forward, and to be the change that's needed. And on that note, we'll see you next time right back here at Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.